Alright guys, let's go ahead and start. Get things cleaned up a little bit while I finish up our prep just a little bit. How are you guys doing? You know, what I should do is probably let people know that we're streaming a little bit later than usual. I had some internet service provider issues earlier. Fun times. Kind of puts a wrinkle in things. Let's, let me say, I guess we should probably say that we're doing a stream, huh? So, let's do that. Do that. So, let people know we're streaming. How are you guys doing? You guys doing well? Played some D&D last night. Gonna play some D&D tomorrow too. I need to finish leveling up my character though for tomorrow. I've not been the greatest player in the world, and I have not immediately leveled up my character. Also, it's kind of a weird character in general. Not a standard character. Playing a ranger, but a beastmaster ranger. But we were doing this thing where just to see how it worked, took the Beastmaster Ranger, but instead of basically using any of the beast rules, just rolling it up and making the beast a sidekick character. And in general, I think it's worked out pretty well. We are getting into some of the mid levels where some of the powers are a little bit wonky. Like I have a power at this upcoming level, which is level 7, which essentially gives that companion cunning action and gives it advantage on initiative checks, but I'm like, but it also goes, or it's a little weird because the sidekick gets bonus on initiative rolls, but we've been using it as a beast, so it's been just going on my turn. But it has its own full suite of independent sort of actions. So the Beastmaster side basically gives you the ability to use cutting action with it, so it allows it to do, or the expert sort of actions. So it allows it to be able to do help or dash or disengage as a bonus action, which is fine, but not as useful as it would be. I mean, I guess the help action is pretty useful. You can really spam the help action to and really abuse the crap out of it with the sidekick. So we might do that in the upcoming sessions, but I'm trying not to abuse the hell out of the system because it is kind of a little cobbled together kind of thing. Let's go ahead and get this post up. Let people know, hey, we're doing a thing. People know, there we go. Move that back over. Perfect. And let's do, I guess we should probably do blue sky, huh? I've been trying to use blue sky more. It's definitely better than Twitter or X, but you know, that's pretty low bar these days. So let's see if I can. Truth is that as far as social media goes, I just have kind of knocked it out at this point, and I mean I have for a very long time, but this especially. Hey, that's right. Okay. Alright, let's get this up. Hopefully things are going well with you guys out there. Hopefully you're playing some D&D or other TTRPGs, having some fun. I know everybody's pretty much embroiled with Oblivion right now. I'm not. I'm just an old fogey who had played that game. And I'm not sure that I necessarily need to go back and replay Oblivion. I feel like I got kind of everything I wanted out of it, and I thought it was just going to, when they announced that it was a remaster, that it was just going to be a basic visual upgrade, but it does sound like, from what I've heard, is that they've made some differences, some changes to the actual mechanics of the game, which is good. Oblivion needed a little tweaking. Probably could have probably used some more from what I've heard, but that's neither here or there. So that's it. All right, we got this done. We got this done. We got this done. We got everything done. All right, let's jump in. So the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about today, we're going to talk about one-room DCs. And this is a thing that I've been using for many years yet now, and I've hinted at it in some of the other stuff. I've talked about it a little bit when we're doing dungeon building and things like that. Figured it would be nice to go into it in a little bit more depth. I thought that might be helpful. Some people seem a little bit confused about it, so I kind of want to jump into it and what it is. So we'll get into it a little bit. So what is sort of a problem that this kind of looks at solving? So let me set the scene, if you will. We'll talk about the situation, then we'll kind of get into the specifics of it. So creating a DC or a target number, depending on what kind of game you're playing, is one of probably the most common tasks that we perform as Dungeon Masters and Game Masters. We do it, if you've run a session, you do it pretty much all the time. It's one of the issues that kind of comes up in a lot of systems, especially I feel like with D&D. Less so with something like, let me think of a good example. Savage Worlds is probably my go-to, where the target number for most things is 4. And that's just it. Is that it gives you a very straightforward baseline guidance about most tasks, target number 4. That's what you need to hit or better to do most things. And then that once you have that baseline, it kind of gives you that. D&D doesn't really give you as concise an answer. In general, the D&D DCs for 5e 2024 fall within like the 13 to 17 range, but still that's a relatively large range. Talking about 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's a range of 5 numbers. That's a pretty good chunk of the die. On D20, that's, a quarter of it. It's 25% variance for just normal challenges, which is a lot. So if you've run any amount of D&D, you know that the circumstances are rarely what we might consider normal when you need to sort of pull a DC out of your butt. Usually it's because your players have decided to do something very weird, and you're trying to be like, okay, what DC should that be? Is that easy? Is that normal? Is that hard? And then you're also trying to internalize what seems like the right number for the world and what seems like the right number based off of that character, because we run into this issue sometimes where you're like, well, you have a rogue with expertise and some sort of magic item, and they end up with a giant bonus to it. Just talking about the ranger my ranger that I was talking about earlier, he has expertise in perception, and he's a ranger, so he's a pretty wisdom-based character. So even in these sort of just now getting in the mid-levels, he has a +10 to perception checks. So he has a passive perception at 20, so he sees most things in general. And so it's hard to set up a DC that feels right for the world and also is at least gives some amount of chance of failure for a character that is good at what they do. And so that makes things a little bit more difficult. It gives you, what I say is that it gives you a lot of cognitive load. You're bogged down a lot in that mid-session trying to come up with DCs off the dome, because you're trying to think of, okay, what are the character's abilities to be able to do this? To be able to make a DC that seems like it feels like it's the right challenge for what they're trying to do. And also seems reasonable in the world. It's not something like, you run into this probably more in sort of like 3X D&D Pathfinder things where the DCs are just gonzo crazy. Where it's like, oh, this is a DC like 35 or something like that. And you're like, nothing to unlock this door. And it's like, so there's no chance that any just normal person would ever be able to unlock this door unless they potentially rolled a natural 20 if you're doing that rule, if you're using a rule where a natural 20 always works. And then it feels kind of weird and unrealistic. Like there's super locksmiths out there, and there's a lot of super locks out there that people just can't break into. It's weird. It kind of slows down. I find that it slows down gameplay for me when I'm sort of like have to grind my mental gears trying to be like, okay, what's the right DC based off of my players and feels consistent in the world? And then if you're not super careful about it, if you're not really consistent about the way that you think about it, you end up with this sort of situation in which the DCs kind of seem to be all over the place and feel really inconsistent. That there's this moving target as to what is normal for the world. So there's that aspect, plus there's draining all this brain energy, all this cognitive load, and that's the fancy term for just like, this is the thing that you got to think about a lot while you're running the game. And that's to do a very basic, fundamental aspect of running the game, coming up with DCs and target numbers. That's such a fundamental part of running the game, and such, in the end, such a simple thing that it really shouldn't take that much squishy, thinky brain matter to do that. At least I don't think so. So that's sort of the situation, but how do we get there? So the biggest boon that TTRPGs have over other games, like video games, board games, etc., is that they're run by the human dungeon master or game master. That's somebody who can adjudicate and improvise situations that rules written down can do, algorithms can't do, procedural generation can't really do, and even AI can't really do. We're getting closer to that with AI, which, you know, for better and for worse. But it's also becoming recursive, where it's just learning off of itself, which is not maybe the greatest thing in the world. So we're gonna have to see how that goes in the future. But a dungeon master has the ability to think in an abstract manner and has an understanding, has the ability to communicate and clarify and understand intent, which is specifically something that AI doesn't do very well, is understand things like intent and context. So it doesn't really understand that very well. So DMs have this power to create DCs to help adjudicate all the banana stuff the players come up with in any given session. And to deal with things like improvised damage and things of that nature. So trying to come up with what seems like reasonable consequences off the dome based off of whatever weird stuff that your players have decided to come up with. So that's sort of the situation we're in. The control and flexibility that dungeon masters have over creating DCs kind of differs by the editions of D&D, and you can see it sort of as it matures through the line of the last 50 years. So in OSR games, there's often like a pretty minimal roll under, and so that gives you kind of concrete DCs for most actions generally, and parameters for adjudication. So it's useful in that way, where when you have something like a 15 strength and your lift gates bend bars doing all normal like fightery kind of stuff, and the thing is like, all right, you just roll a d20. If you roll a 15 or less, then you succeed. And you're like, cool, that's based off of my strength rather than the situation, which is nice. And then the dungeon master has the ability to sort of adjudicate maybe that number based off of, you know, are you using specific tools? Are you doing something like that? Is this gate particularly rusted, and that makes it actually more difficult to move, stuff like that. But it gives you sort of that pinpoint baseline to at least start working off of in any sort of given situation by using the roll under technique. So it's very useful for that. But as we moved into sort of mid-series D&D, into sort of like the 2000s, and we see the switch from TSR to Wizards of the Coast, owning it in 3rd edition D&D and this consolidated D20 core mechanic, we see a difference. And then you see a lot of situations where there are mass amounts of concretes. There's so many more rules for very specific situations, and the adjudication for that is like, we're going to give you so many, just this glut of very specific rules to work with, all these floating modifiers, all those things. So there's a lot rules wise that as DM you have to sort of like siphon down into your brain and be on top of. And that came out of sort of the situation coming from earlier OSR, what we would call OSR now. This idea that going from one game to another was such a wildly different experience based off of how the Dungeon Master ran the game, which if you've ever looked at any of the sort of old like Dungeon Master guides and stuff like that, it's incredibly esoteric and not super straightforward, often in the way that it's written, in the way it tries to convey its ideas, or it gives a lot of situations where it's just like, it's kind of up to Dungeon Master discretion. So it left players with this very different play experiences based off of your individual Dungeon Master and how things were adjudicated. So one of the things that they did with 3rd edition is really try to iron things out and be like, make everything very bulletproof, which made it easier, I think, to be a dungeon master, assuming you could get your mind wrapped around all the rules, or you spend a bunch of time looking stuff up in books. So it kind of went from one kind of far extreme where there's a very clear, very simple procedure with a lot of DM flexibility to something that's got a whole bunch of concrete details to set up and not as much DM flexibility. So kind of like there is kind of a one way to run and adjudicate the game. Then you kind of get into where we are now with sort of the 5e 2024, and it lands like most things with 5e. They kind of shot for the middle. It definitely feels like the vanilla edition of D&D. It just kind of has a little something for everything. It's an IGN 7 out of 10 kind of game. Take that as you want. That's not the quality of the game. I think 5e 2024 rule set is pretty good at what it does. I think it does exactly what it's meant to do, which is kind of be the vanilla flavor of D&D. It is something that everybody will pick up and be like, yeah, I could play this, or yeah, I could run this. This is fun. Is it, if you're an older person who's played a bunch of editions and a bunch of different games, is it probably your favorite edition in game? No, likely not. It's likely not your favorite. Sometimes I call 5e or 2024 sort of everybody's second favorite edition of D&D. Like, everybody likes some other edition more, but everybody's generally happy being like, yeah, we can play 5e, that's fine. And so that's sort of where it lands, or at least it does for me. And we see this in 5e in 2024. There's a return on the emphasis to return power to the D&D. If you look through any of the DMGs, they can be a little wishy-washy about how to do things. There's not a lot of stuff that's really laid out, where I think 3rd edition and 4th edition did a much better job of sort of onboarding people into how to be a dungeon master through things like the Dungeon Master's Guide. And 5e returns to some of the other aspects, the other ways of DMGs, where you're looking at something where it's a little bit more of a reference guide rather than a handbook on how to be a dungeon master. Some of that's changed in 2025. Not a ton of it, though. It is very similar to that, but it does have some rules like, hey, here's how to prep a session. The quality of those prepping rules is individual because the way that people prep D&D is different. So it's hard to be like, this is good or this is bad. It's going to depend on you. I think if you are a brand new dungeon master and you're jumping into it and you're trying to figure out how to prep your first session, I think that they give you a pretty good rubric for how to do it right off bat. That kind of gives you an idea of what to kind of expect to come up in a session. I still think that the sort of sly flourish way of prepping D&D is probably the best, especially for a new dungeon master or game master. I think that Mike Shea's method really sort of boils it down to the very specifics, and I think that's a better starting place, and going from there and then expanding out from there. But they are somewhat similar. You can definitely see a lot of inspiration in the 2025 prep rules, definitely looking at something like Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And those 7 steps? 7 steps, right? 7 steps. 7 steps. I'm pretty sure it's 7 steps. I'd have to pull out my book. I'm not going to do that. Because I don't use that specific method for prepping anymore. But it is a good one. So that kind of leaves us, what do you do with today's Dungeon Master and Game Master? So what are you supposed to do when it comes to DCs? And there's not a ton of guidance. So where do you start? Where can you get to a place where you're coming up with just basic DCs is not such a large cognitive load when you're in the session, but also save you from being like, every time that I prep a session, I need to prep every single DC that's in there. Spend the time outside the game coming up with that session. So what I want to do is introduce you to, it's not new, but it is maybe not as well known as it should be, and that's the one-room DC method. And we're going to get into that. But first, hey, welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, glad to have you. If you're back, this is not your first time, you might realize that, hey, the room behind me looks a little bit different. Yeah, I moved my desk. We're going to be moving some stuff around and probably changing up a little bit of the decor. Kind of get tired, we're going to move a bunch of stuff around, so we'll see how it goes. So ignore some of the mess behind me, some of that will get cleaned up over time. But it's showing off a lot of stuff, so obviously my desk was on that side of the room. It's not anymore. It's over here now. So anyways, on the channel, we do playing and we run different TTRPGs. I've been doing it for, I guess, a couple of decades now. And I'm here to sort of, across editions of different games, and I'm here to share what I've learned sort of along the way to help you hopefully have more fun running and playing D&D or whatever your preferred TTRPG is. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about one of those. So, anyways, if you like the content, go ahead and drop that down below. And share this link online. That's super helpful for the channel and get other people to see it. And if you like what we see here and you want to see more of what we talk about, of course, there's the subscribe. So go ahead and do that. So, what is the One Room Dungeon? Well, I said we're going to talk about some different RPGs, and that's what we do. We need to talk about this little guy right here. So, if you're not familiar with this, this is Index Card RPG. This is the 2nd edition core book. There we go. It is quite nice, put out by Runehammer Games. I think they're actually maybe a 3rd edition at this point. Anyways, it is a little bit different than D&D. It's a lighter game, it's a faster game. One of the things that's good is that it is a somewhat generic game, so I believe, yeah, it gives you, just in this book alone, it gives you a number of different adventures, and it gives you, those adventures are set across 3 different settings. One of them is a standard fantasy setting, one of them is a Weird West setting, like a Deadlands kind of style. So you have a D&D kind of analog, you have a Deadlands kind of analog, and the last one is Warp Shell, which is a sci-fi, weird sci-fi kind of setting. And if I was going to put it in other game terms, what would be a good thing for it? I guess it's something, how would I describe it? Let's maybe use movie terms. Something that's kind of like between, I don't know, maybe I was just painting myself into a corner here. It's a weird sci-fi, let's put it that way. So not quite, it's a little lighter, softer sci-fi than something like maybe Mothership, which is very like sort of alien based, but it's got a similar vibe to it as that it's usually kind of got some horrific stuff that's going on, but it is a little bit lighter on the sci-fi aspect. It's not as hard. It doesn't feel as technical in the sci-fi. But one of the things that's introduced in here, and if you're a person who runs a game, I very much highly recommend this book, even if you never intend to play the system, just because the DM section is, the Dungeon Master or Game Master section is quite good. It is well written, it gives you a lot of just basic ideas, and has a very different, I would feel like very different perspective on how to run games. And really boils it down to what is, from the focus of what are you trying to accomplish at the table? Rather than, talking about the mechanics of the game and the story or the narrative. It's like, hey, you're going to run a session. What do you want that session to look like? What do you want to be the feel? What do you want to accomplish at the table? What is success for a session of Index Card RPG? And it's called Index Card RPG because it uses this index card deck to help you sort of build out dungeons and adventures and stuff like that. It's very fun. So give it a check if you want. He also, Runehammer has a new system out, Skull and Crown, I think is the name of it. I haven't looked into it. Honestly, I've been a little off their stuff. They changed up, they also have a YouTube channel. They changed up sort of the way they do their content on YouTube, and I haven't been paying as much attention to it. That's a me thing though. But you should definitely go check it out. Even if you don't like the current videos, you can go back and see some of the old running the game videos, style games, and a lot of that ended up in here. So if you want to see it in action, see him sort of go through it and explain the concepts that are in this book, you can go do that. Highly recommended. So, what is a one-room DC? So the one-room DC is a very simple process. You essentially go, hey, you're going to have an encounter, a scene, a challenge, whatever your room is in a dungeon, and you go, okay, we have this one thing, and we're prepping this one thing, and we're going to set a baseline DC for this specific room or scene, for how difficult we expect it for the players to get through it, the player characters to get through it. And that's going to give us an idea of like That's just general difficulty. It's just to give us that baseline DC that we're looking for. And then from that, we can modify some things. And it becomes that baseline DC becomes the DC that we're looking for any checks. We're looking through for any saving throws. If they're trying to do if they're trying to attack like a pillar or something in the room, it gives you an idea of what they're trying to hit. You just use the same DC for all of that. And then you modify it a little bit. But first, let me give you an example. So I'm going to pull an example from a dungeon that I made not too long ago for my current game that I'm running. One moment. We'll get a drink. That's good bean juice. Tasty. Alright, so this is from a dungeon that I made for my current campaign, in which they're diving down into an underground sinkhole that's got this ancient jungle forest in it. Not really important. What is important is that they climb up into the side of this sinkhole, and there's an opening with a little trickle of water that comes in. They come in there, and it's a place that we call the Azure Serpent Shrine. The DC for this room, everything that's in this room, is a DC 13. So that's our baseline. So there is a giant serpent head in the cavern, and the hallway is thick with silt from the water that's running out of it. That serpent head has 2 gemstone eyes that the PCs can prize free, and there's water pouring from its closed maw like a fountain. So I'll give you some examples of what they might do in that area. So they might want to make a religion check on the shrine. Great, you want to know more about the Azure Serpent. Guess what the DC is? 13. Now, there are some things that we can change here. So the way that I set this up is that this is an old religion. So what it means is that if they have the druid in the party, which this party did have a druid, that druid just automatically knows what this is. No check required. But we also have a cleric, and so if our druid for whatever reason didn't make the session, they weren't there, and so we're relying on somebody like the cleric to make the religion check, he kind of deals with new religions. So he might know what it is, but he might also not. No, he might just know that it's an older god. That might be the only information he gets from it without being successful on the check. If they want to use thieves' tools or make just a strength check to just remove the gemstone eyes, guess what the DC is for that? It's 13. Do they want to do some investigation to see if to recognize the trap that's there and how it works with the gemstones, which are on this sort of like cantilevered weight sort of system, where the gemstones are not actually of the same size. So trying to counterbalance it, you got to do like the Indiana Jones thing with the bag of sand and be like, I gotta make sure it's the right weight so I can swap it out. So to recognize that there's a trap there and figure that out and try to do that, the DC's 13. Now, if they were going to do something like do the sandbag trick, I might say, oh, that's maybe a more difficult thing. And I might go, you know what, I think that's going to be DC 16 instead. And we'll get to how we make that adjudication in just a second. And let's say that they set off the trap, and they need to, the mouth opens, and there's a bunch of water that's dammed up inside the serpent's head's mouth. And so the mouth drops open, this torrent of water floods in there and threatens to push them out of the cave, and they'll take some falling damage because as they hit the ground. So it's a strength save to sort of avoid being swept away by this torrent of water. Now this one I was like, this is going to be difficult because I said that there was the slippery mud that's in there and this torrent of water. So this was, it's a strength save to do it, and this is a difficult thing because you've already failed a number of things to get here. You failed to recognize the trap, and or you failed to figure out how to get around the trap. So this becomes more difficult for you. So that would be a DC 16, so I made it more difficult. So why do we do something with these different DCs? So how did those numbers change? One of the things, and this comes pretty much directly from this book, is that you can modify the baseline DC, in this case +3 or -3, and that's sort of the general go-to. You can change it as you want. If you're using something like the 5e rules, I would say one of the things that you could look at instead, if you didn't want, or you want to be maybe a slightly more granular than the +3, is you could look at something like the cover rules, which is one of the very few things in D&D that gives you situational modifiers that are not straight advantage or disadvantage, and that's a +2 and a +5. So if you wanted to be like, oh, it's a little difficult, +2. Oh, it's way difficult, +5. And then you could do, oh, it's a little easier than what I think the baseline DC is. You go, okay, -2. Or you're like, oh, this is actually, should be much easier than everything else in this room, comparative to everything else in this room. -5 to that DC. So that gives you a very simple framework. There's not a lot of cognitive load you need to remember. As long as you can remember the modifier and you think about the situation, context, and the bananas weird stuff that your players are trying to do, you go, okay, that sounds like a +3. That sounds easier. Or you put yourself in a good situation. If you don't want to give them advantage, or if they already have advantage, or they've done some sort of prep work, and you want to represent that by lowering the DC, you can be like, okay, I'm going to take 3 off that DC. Just because they've gone about this what I think is a very smart, clever way. They've set themselves up for success, so I'm going to lower the DC for them to make it easier for them, rather than give them advantage. Or maybe they already have advantage for something. So if they have somebody helping them, but maybe they also have a tool with them, you might be like, okay, well, I'm also going to like pull down the DC a little bit then, because they've really sort of stacked the deck in their favor. So it gives you a lot of adjudication, a lot of flexibility in adjudication without giving you, avoiding something like that 3X era where we're just like, there's tons and tons of floating modifiers for everything, and there's stacking up DC difficulties, there's stacking up player bonuses, and those things together. So that's one of the things that I really like about it. And then the important thing to remember about this is that the DC is never ironclad. These are tools that go in the toolbox. You are the person who uses the tool. If the tool is using you, then you need to reorient the way that you think about it, perhaps. If you're like, oh, well, it has to be a plus, it can only be a -3 because that's how we use the modifier. Nope, that's not how it works. If they do something that makes the, let's say, makes the challenge of whatever they're trying to do absolutely trivial, that's a point where you can just be like, there's no rule required. You guys set yourself up with in such a good, strong way that there's no way you're going to fail this challenge. That's just not going to happen. So we're not going to roll for it. You just do it. Or maybe you can have them roll for it, but it also sucks to call for a roll and basically make the DC don't roll a natural 1, and then have them roll like a 2 and have like a final roll of like an 8, and you're like, well, you still pass. Like, that doesn't feel, that's not a great table experience. You're like, oh, okay. Did I even really need to roll? If it was just like a 5% chance of failure regardless of any of my bonuses? So that's sort of a situation thing. Those are the sorts of things I feel like you think about as you become more and more experienced Dungeon Master and Game Master, is sort of how you want the game to feel for the players. You start broaching up into just the mechanics of running the game, into the feeling of the experience of being in the game, and what you're trying to do with it. Which is the sort of thing that this Dungeon Master Guide talks about. It's sort of what sort of game play experience do you want to have, and how do you accomplish that? So, and a good example of that from that Azure Serpent thing is just what I said, was the Druid. If you have the Druid with the party, there's no check required. The Druid just knows what the Azure Serpent is. They just know what it is, because they're familiar. They're a Druid. They understand that. It is a Druid thing. But the overall, I find the one-room DCs kind of do 3 very specific things for you as Dungeon Master or Game Master. They help make your prep simpler by using the baseline DCs. They reduce the amount of sort of thinking when it comes to creating off-the-cuff DCs, and it helps you reinforce tone or expectations for challenges, which I think is super, super helpful. So let's talk about those things a little bit. So creating baseline DCs makes prep super easy and consistent. Anytime that I prep and I just go, okay, the DC for this challenge I think is about a 12. 12 seems kind of right. So if there's any traps or secret doors, the guard's passive perception, anything like that, that's all 12s. I don't need to worry about that. That means that I don't need to key DCs for every single thing in every single room. That helps reframe when you look at a room in a dungeon or a scene in any sort of adventure. Instead of thinking about all the disparate things in there, you think holistically about what is the holistic challenge of this scene. How difficult do I think this should be for the players? Just as a baseline. And kind of go from there and work out, rather than making it just a container that holds a whole bunch of different, varying independent challenges, which can be really useful as far as prepping, and making it very clear to have sort of static modifiers that increase or decrease the baseline DCs. Makes it very easy to wing stuff and improvise it on the fly, and you can adjust DCs without having to do a whole bunch of that thinking that we talked about. And is it always going to be perfect? No, but it's going to get you to a point where you're going to have to do that thing where you have to think about, okay, what are their capabilities, what makes sense for the world, and try to find the middle ground for a DC. You're going to do that a lot less often. Are you going to be able to 100% get away with it? Probably not. You can't totally forget that. But you're not going to have to do it nearly as much. I find myself, I rarely have to do it at all. In fact, there's a lot of times where if I have something like that, I just leave it up to a dice roll. I'm like, I don't know what the difficulty for this thing should be, because I haven't thought about it up to this point. So I'm just going to roll, and that's going to be what it is. That's a specific choice and style of game you want to have. That's the style of game that I run, though. I prep things, and then if you go off the prep, we're going to find out what the challenge is together, because I have no idea. We're going to find it out together, me and the players. So if you decide to do some weird things, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe it's a bad idea. I don't know. If I do know, then obviously I'll try to set a DC, like that baseline DC for whatever it is. But in some instances, it's like, I don't know, man. Maybe this was a good idea. It sounds like a reasonable idea, but I have no idea if there's any hiccups that stand in your way on the way there. We'll do that. Let's see, what else, other things. Oh, one of the things that I really, really like is that mixing the room and scene DCs in your prep, having some things that are low and having some things that are high and some things that are kind of in the middle, it gives you this ability to sort of plot out peaks of high challenge and then valleys of low challenge, and that really helps when you're trying to pace something like a dungeon or an adventure and be like, okay, they went through a really hard thing, now the next thing's maybe going to be kind of easy, and then it's going to be maybe a little bit more difficult, and then maybe it's going to be easy again, and then maybe it's going to really spike up and be really difficult. And then, so that gives you this idea to be able to have those moments of higher tension and higher difficulty, and then give breathing space for some portions of the dungeon or the adventure that can be low challenge, safer, easier. And those can be really easy to sort of lull players into a false sense of security, and then you hit them with another higher DC, or maybe it slowly climbs up, or maybe it starts off really hard and then everything else kind of goes down. So it gives you this different idea and gives you the ability as Dungeon Master when you're prepping to really set the tone and the pace that you want for your adventure, which I think is incredibly useful, and is definitely something that you should look into doing as a Dungeon Master or Game Master, is trying to arrange your adventure not just so each individual part is fun, each different room or scene or challenge encapsulates itself as fun, but also that they work together to kind of have a good overall pacing and flow. So that's some definitely intermediate Dungeon Master, Game Master stuff that you start to peek into once you feel like you can make a good adventure, and you can feel like each different encounter or challenge that you have in that you can really fill out. Then it's time to jump and be like, okay, how do I string them together into a whole that is more than the sum of its parts, to really reach that sort of next level of creating really great adventures. And let's see, and the example I have here is that if you have the PCs and you have set up some sort of timer for them on the adventure, like they're running against the clock, and you can set them in a situation in, say, a path in this adventure where there's a fork in the road, And this has to be a meaningful option for them, so they have to understand the choice that they're making. They're like, you can go one way, in which there will be 2 challenges, but they will be more difficult challenges. Or you can go this way, and that will have 3 challenges, but those challenges will be easier. So it gives you a situation is like, okay, if you take the hard way, you're going to reach the climax quicker. You're going to have more time when you get to the final encounter. But you're probably going to have fewer resources because there's going to be more difficult challenges you're going to have to go through. And there's a higher chance that you might just outright fail them, which is probably going to be bad. Or you can take the route that's going to be easier. And if you take the easier route, you're probably going to expend less resources. You have a higher chance of getting through it, like succeeding on everything. But when you get to the climax, you're going to have less time. And so you might represent that as, we'll use the classic cultists. There's a cult doing some sort of foul ritual to raise some sort of monster or something like that. So whichever path you take might depend how many rounds you have until the ritual is complete once you get there. Maybe you have, if you take the easy route, maybe you only have 2 rounds. You got to stop the ritual before that's over. If you go the hard way, maybe you have 4 rounds. So that gives you like a full combat, basically, with some buffer room. If you go the hard way, if you go the easy route, you have to focus on stopping the ritual rather than just beating the combat, probably killing everybody in the room. So choices, meaningful choice. Decide which way you want to go and understand what the consequences of that is. And then if you fail, maybe we knock off 1 round for each. So if you take the hard way and you had 4, but you fail one of the challenges, now you're down to 3. If you fail both of them, well, then you're in a hard spot where you spend a lot of resources and you only have 2 rounds to knock it off, to stop the ritual. And that puts you in a dicey place. And then if you're on the easy path, and you might only have 2 rounds to start with, if you fail one of those, you only got 1 round to do it. If you fail 2 of the 3 easy challenges, the ritual is complete before you even get there. And now that climax has totally changed. Maybe they've summoned their fiend or demon or whatever, and now you've got to fight that stupid thing or run away from it, and that spirals out. It's the aftermath of the entire failed adventure, and that's its own fun thing. To having an adventure where the player characters aren't necessarily successful. So those are things to watch out. So let's talk about what are some pit traps to watch out for when you're using the one-room DCs. So one of the things is you want to take care to avoid players doing ability check dogpiling. You have probably seen this, especially on hard DCs, where one player tries it, they fail, and then another player's like, oh, I'll try, and I'll try, and I'll try, and then you have the whole group basically trying to do it. So you usually want to avoid that. So that's something to watch out for when you're doing these one-room DCs, especially if you set a high DC. You also want to make sure that when you set things, especially anytime that you set a DC or set any sort of challenge like this, you want to make sure that any critical information or path through the adventure doesn't become gated off by failing a check or save or whatever it is. Like, you don't want to put yourself in a situation in which the door closes on the adventure. It's like, oh, you guys failed to get through this one door, so you can't actually get into the rest of the dungeon. Like, this is the bottleneck, and you failed at the bottleneck, and now you're stuck. So you want to avoid situations like that. One of the nice things about using the room DCs and setting low room DCs is that it encourages non-specialized PCs to try their hand, and you want to make sure that they know that, like, hey, this is not a particularly difficult challenge. You don't have to necessarily wait for the rogue to look for traps. Like, anybody can look for traps, and then be like, and you get the feeling that you could potentially find traps in this room. Like, that's one of the things where we talk about when I talked about at the top, you don't want to put yourself in a situation which the rogue has such a high ability to do things like deal with traps that then you're artificially inflating the DCs for the traps so that only the rogue can take care of them. but also not in a situation where it's like if the rogue is the one who's looking for traps, then there's almost no way, if you set it at a lower DC, that they're going to miss it. So it's a balancing act. So it's nice to have the different rooms and be like, oh, well, the rogue can look for this specific thing, but while they're doing that, the DC is really low for anybody else to do anything, even if they're not specialized in that specific way. Another thing to look out is that if you do consistent DCs, that can make the scenes or rooms feel really samey. It's important to be really varied with the types and descriptions of challenges to keep things easy and flowing and particularly interesting. So if everything, like I said, with the Azure Serpent, everything in that is, what, 13? Is that what I said? Yeah. Everything in the Azure Serpent Shrine is a DC 13. So that was the investigation, that's the religion check. So all of those are, the DC's all the same. The DC doesn't itself inform anything interesting about the scene. So it's on you to be like, to really sort of lean into the description of the challenges and the types of challenges that they're doing. So really kind of get in there and be descriptive with the way that you talk about it. So that way it just doesn't feel like, oh, I'm rolling a die to see if I hit a 13 or not. Be like, oh, how are you investigating? What are you looking for? Okay, you reach your hand up under it and you feel this sort of mechanism, and you kind of follow it. You have an idea that maybe it goes through and it attaches to the other eye. And as you touch it, just barely touch it, it seems to be perfectly balanced and floats up and down a little bit just from the most bare touch of your fingers. Really kind of give in there and get some of the details going to make it interesting. Really kind of draw your players in, because the DC alone is not going to do that. Especially if they're all the same DC. And that one room DCs are really flexible. That makes them really great for improv. Like I said, that doesn't take a lot of cognitive load and take a lot of brain power to do. But that can still seem pretty daunting if you're an inexperienced DM and you're used to playing something like only published adventures where they give you basically a finite DC for pretty much anything that's worth looking at in any sort of room or challenge or anything like that. So if that's the case, it's something that I think if you want to be a successful Dungeon Master or Game Master, learning how to improv is just kind of part of the game, and there's no way to do that better than just doing it, unfortunately. There's no amount of secret tips for improv that's going to teach you how to do it, or having a bajillion lists of improv prompts and resources that are going to help you do it. At some point, you just kind of have to bite the bullet and just kind of do it. It's in session, and you'll suck at it until you start sucking at it a little bit less, and that's okay. And it's okay to just tell your players, be like, hey, I don't have anything prepped for that, so if that feels a little weird, and you can get feedback from your friends after the session if you want. Be like, oh, how's that going? You guys kind of went in a different direction than I thought. Did that feel alright? Did anybody think that was weird or out of sorts? Did I get anything wrong there? That's alright to ask for feedback. Most of the time, your players are going to give you feedback like, session was fun. Great. Useful. So don't be discouraged if you don't get feedback on it either. Just kind of keep doing it. So if you are a new DM and the idea of setting one room DC is maybe a little daunting, knowing that you're going to have to improv kind of anything else that kind of comes up, what I'd say is that do your prep as normal, and then like pick one scene or one dungeon room and try the one room DC method for just that one room and just see how it goes. Like, write yourself a little note and be like, okay, in this Azure Serpent Shrine, everything in it's going to be DC 13, and that's got that +3, -3 modifier on it. And I'm just going to try it out for this room. Once I get to it and see how it works, how it plays the table, do I feel confident in it? Does it work well? If so, maybe I do more rooms. Maybe I try the next short, like 5-room dungeon. I'll try to do the whole dungeon that way and see if I can do an entire dungeon like that. And sort of like baby step your way up if you're feeling inexperienced about it. But I do think, even as an experienced Dungeon Master or Game Master, taking that step forward in that way is going to be extremely useful for you, because this will be a tool that I've found to be very useful for me over many, many years and really reduce the amount of prep that I need to do, or the amount of thinky stuff that I need to do at the table just to come up with the most fundamental, basic building block of playing the game, which is setting a DC. So trying to get away from that just so I can be like, oh yeah, that's DC, whatever. Or, I mean, in my style, I rarely tell my players what the DCs is most of the time. Usually, if it's difficult, I tell them to roll high. Or if it's not difficult, I tell them, hey, don't roll low. Or the consequences are really bad. Hey, don't roll low. I don't know. I feel like my players like that. That's more of a DM player thing, though, than really any practical advice. That's just really my style. But yeah, so what do you think? Have you tried something like this one-room DC thing before? I find it extremely useful ever since I sort of latched onto it from Runehammer, and especially after reading the ICRPG book and getting into that. It really changed the way that I came up with things. It's like, oh, that's super simple. Makes things way easier. It means that I can prep more, I can key more dungeon rooms in one page, which just trying to keep notes simpler is very nice. It gives me a very simple rubric in which I can be really flexible with and feel like the numbers are always going to kind of feel right. And that's how it's worked out for me. So, have you used something similar like this in your games? Comment down below and share some of your experience with that, or if you have a different system that helps you manage DCs or target numbers for your games, go ahead and drop that in, because I'm always interested in sort of different ways that people do things to try to get better myself and try to look at different alternatives for myself. Just because I have something I like doesn't mean that it's necessarily the best way to do it. It just means that I'm familiar with it and it's easy for me. But there could be better ways out there, and I'm always eager to learn and get a little bit better along with the rest of us. And as the Runehammer does say, try to run D&D just a little mo better. Just try to do it. But yeah, that's it for one-room DCs. Have fun with them. Try them out and let me know how they work. So that's everything that we were going to talk about as far as that is concerned. So the rest of the stream, we're gonna chill out a little bit, and we are going to do that. We're actually going to talk a little bit about the last session. I'm going to write up some of my notes, or transfer my notes, I should say. Let me get over to my session prep document, and we will take a look at that. And I'll go over some of my prep. I think this is super useful, especially if you're a new Dungeon Master or Game Master. It's always nice, at least it has been for me, to see how other people prep games and talk about the prep and how it ran at the table. So we'll go through the prep real quick, see what it looks like, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to take just a short break in just a minute. Like, hold on, I'm not going anywhere. Primarily, I just need to... I gotta go blow my nose. That's really the big thing. And I'll be back, and I may get some more coffee too while I'm up. And I'll be right back in just a second. Okay, so hang out. We'll be right back. Here we go. Time me. I'm going fast. Alright, here we go. Okay, alright, we're back. We're back. Hopefully not too long, a little bit longer than usual. Or, not usual, longer than I thought. But still, hopefully shorter than usual. Try to make it quick. So, we're going to jump in and talk a little bit about our last session of D&D, the campaign I'm running. Give you guys a look at my prep. We'll talk a little bit about how it went. I'll put down the notes, how things went. We can look at the prep and how things went compared to the prep. What things were had to improv along the way. Get an idea of kind of that sort of stuff. So you can get an idea of what it kind of looks like to run the game in general. Or at least how I do it, and give it maybe a different perspective. Maybe you'll find that hopefully useful. Maybe it'll inform how you decide to prep things in the future. Maybe you can look at the things I do and be like, well, I'm not going to do it that way. Because you don't know what you're doing. Maybe, yeah, I mean, it works for me, but it might not work for you. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let me go ahead and pull this up. There we go. Alright, let's do that. Alright, so we've got, this was session 6. Shooting Maiden 54. We had 3 of our PCs there. We had Caleb's, our cleric, we knew was going to be out. Sniz, we did not know, was kind of a last minute. Had to have some an emergency wisdom teeth removal, which we were not expecting. So I had to, they were definitely in the prep, and then had to get sort of moved around. None of this stuff is new. Down here, the folk are still doing what the folk are doing. The weather's still what the weather is. So, they finally made it to the big town. That's where we left last time, is that they were in the queue to get in through the town gates. And that's where we picked up this time. So, things are going pretty well for them. We did. So, at the end of last session, and before, they said, oh, well, we want to... I always try to get feedback at the end of the session. What they liked, what they didn't like, what they want to see more of, that sort of thing. And they said, oh, well, we want some more combat. This is funny because pretty much any opportunity we've given them combat, they have gone around it or decided not to do it, which makes a lot of sense in character. But as the players, you know, you want combat, and then anytime that combat's sort of on the table, you find a way around it. And that's what happened right here. So we had 2 thugs behind the PCs that are picking on Cass. Cass is the NPC that's with them. Is sort of somebody who did owe a life debt to Severin, one of our PCs, but has fulfilled that life debt. Has already saved Severin's life. In session 3? Really thought that was going to take a lot longer, but the opportunity came up and Cass jumped on it. Literally jumped in front of lightning. Great job, Cass. Anyways, lived to tell the tale. So they are riding in the carriage with the courtesan Pearl. She is a courtesan, so she's sort of like a high-class prostitute. Kinda geisha adjacent. They helped her out, so she's letting them ride in the carriage, except for Severin, because there wasn't enough room. So Severin and Cass are actually walking behind the carriage. So they're in the queue, waiting to get into town. And Cass starts getting picked on by these thugs behind them, primarily because Cass is human, and the place that we ended up running this campaign in my own little world. So if you want to know anything about that world, I've got other streams about it, or you can go read the blog where we've been building it slowly but surely over many years. You can go take a look at it if you want to do the ridiculous world building all the way from the ground up, which goes to starting with things like plate tectonics and building up from there. You don't need to do that. That's just what I do, because I'm crazy. Don't be like me. But if you want to see how that's done and how we got to this point, you can go check out all that. There's plenty of good reading there, and you can see where it is. But they decided to pick we're setting this campaign pretty much in this area, in which there are just not really any humans. Cass is a human. We come up with some speciest, I guess. So there are some half-elves behind them who are not big fans of humans in general. Humans and elves in the world are not super big fans of half-elves. They are a remembrance of bad times in the past. And some animosity. And that's a road that goes both ways. So they were picking on Cass, calling him things like Spoonier, which is, I didn't come up with it, I saw it somewhere. I can't remember where. Probably Reddit? Probably? As sort of a slur to be used against humans. Especially from races that have pointy ears. So it's sort of the opposite of knife ears. So they are pointy ears. Instead of pointy ears or knife ears, they are spoon ears. Or round ears, I guess you can call them that too. So they dealt with that, so I threw this in at the beginning because they said they won in combat. I thought, oh, this is real low stakes combat because the last combat really kicked their butt, so this was going to be sort of like a confidence booster. Oh, you can just get into it with these two thugs out behind the carriage. Probably just going to be blows. Ideally, nobody pulls a weapon, but they turned it around and they decided to just intimidate them instead. What do you want, guys? You asked for combat, I give you combat, and you're like, no, we don't want the combat, we're just going to intimidate them. Okay. And they were successful with it. Gave themselves a little bit of advantage. They used some thaumaturgy to help with the intimidation check. And so they got around that. They talked to Pearl a little bit inside the carriage, and then they got to... We did not do the lumber wagon. I thought things were already taking a little bit longer out there, so I decided to shift that off, so we might come back to the lumber wagon, but we did not do it this time. And actually what we can do is we can just do this. I'll select the things that we did do, and I'm gonna go up here and we'll just strike that. I gotta remember the keyboard shortcut, because getting to this in Google Docs, getting to strike through in Google Docs is a pain in the butt. Alt Shift 5. Remember that. Alt Shift 5. Okay. And they did the entrance toll, which I knew was going to be a thing. They asked about it. Pearl said she would step out of the carriage so the boys can peel off their arms and armor. Only one person in the crew right now, which is not the fighter, wears medium or heavier armor, which is the only armor that they would need to peel off. So everybody was good, because that was Caleb, their cleric, and their cleric wasn't there. So he'll have to figure that out once he gets back to realize that he's not wearing his armor while he's in town. So this is a good way, I find, to make low combat, to raise the stakes of low combat, otherwise very simple combats in town. Be like, oh, well, you have access to very small weapons. You really can't do, I said, any weapons that are longer than your forearm. So that pretty much, like, you have a forearm. Why am I showing you my forearm? You have a forearm. You know what your forearm looks like. You look at your forearm and be like, okay, what are weapons smaller than that? And that pretty much leaves you with daggers for the most part. So no short swords, no axes, no long swords for sure, or anything. And so all those have to be piece tied to get into the town. So no medium heavy armor, no shields, no D6 or larger damage die weapons. So that means bows have to be unstrung, crossbows are unstrung, all that sort of stuff. So that pretty much leaves you with daggers, which is sort of like their self-defense thing. So they're like, oh, well, you can wear like a gambeson or leather armor, some light armor, and you can have a dagger, but that's it. And it's just to sort of mitigate having a whole bunch of people in a very small contained space just smacking each other and causing a whole bunch of violence. Otherwise, they also any spellcasting foci cannot be brandished in public. There's issues for that. And then at the gate, there's a toll. There's 1 copper per pair of legs and or wheels. So if you're bringing animals in, it's more expensive because they have 2 pairs of legs. So it's actually more expensive to bring animals into town than it is people. And vehicles. For the most part, because wagons also have 2 axles. So it's just a different way to kind of be like, okay, what's the nature of their vision? They could have gone with business documentation because they did have a letter to deliver to the apothecary, so they could have shown that off, but they decided to just be like, oh, well, we're here prior to the festival. Like pretty much everybody else is. That's why there's this massive queue to get into the town. And as I explained this, they're getting into town, that the town is just absolutely swollen with people. Like, this town is not of the size and does not have the resources to really handle this size of population, because it only happens a couple times, well, more than a couple. I guess it happens roughly 4 times a year for the big festivals throughout the year, which is coming up in about I guess about a week. A little longer than that. It's like 8 days, something like that. And they have to say that they have some sort of residence or lodging lined up. The courtesan did vouch for them, so Pearl did say, oh, well, the people behind me, the group behind me, they're staying with me if they want. So they confirmed that rather than trying to get a room at one of the inns lined up before they got into town. And then, after they enter the town, I let them each make a perception check, and whichever the perception checks that they made determined what they saw. So one of them saw the Euphorium, which is a sort of theater in the round situation. They heard a bunch of minstrels, and it sounds like an orchestra tuning up. A bunch of people sort of tuning up instruments. Off to one side, one person heard the gong of a funeral procession that was walking through town, and another person heard, or actually saw, the glint of the sunlight bouncing off the brass scales of this massive fish that's on top of a temple that's got a visage of a fish with fang teeth from the Leviathan temple. So kind of just immediately be like, here are 3 points of interest. If you want to interact with them in town, boom, there they are. If you want to investigate them further, there's stuff to do at all of these things, or to learn about the world in general. Or you can go deliver your thing, which is what they decided to do. So we'll do that. So they decided to not look into any of those things specifically, but I was able to tell them 3 points of interest in the town just right off the bat. There are 2 points of interest in one thing that's happening in town, I should say. Alright, it was Alt Shift 5. There we go. And that means that we'll save this lumber wagon thing for later. And sort of reaffirm to them the uncovered mangrove warrens. They already learned about that. And I did tell them at the end of this session, it's like, look, you guys are in a very specific time frame. You have a number of days before the festival, assuming you guys want to go to the festival. So you have enough time right now. It's like, if you guys, it's kind of the put up or shut up time. You guys need to determine if you want to go on an adventure. This is the time to make that decision. This upcoming session, which will be session 7, will be the time to make that decision. If you're going to travel to any place, because you'll need time to travel there, do the thing, and come back before the festival starts. If you care about the festival, which they seem like they care about. Because if not, then you can go do whatever adventure you want, no matter how far away it is, or how much time it takes. So they went to the apothecary first, which is what I expected. That's why it's first on the list. They would do the letter delivery from Ghazi to Keisha. So they went out there and did that. I did strike out Sniz. I'm actually going to unstrike this now that it's back in my notes. Alt Shift 5. There we go. Because Sniz ended up not being there, so I struck it from there just so I didn't accidentally read it off. So that Sniz looks familiar to the apothecary because the apothecary knows his missing father. But Sniz wasn't there, so that interaction didn't happen. I was going to have that interaction without the actual player being there to engage with it. That would have been weird and silly. Even though Sniz was technically there. So we didn't know what we were going to do with Cass. So we did say, I've been talking with a player a little who Cass is tied to. And now that Cass doesn't have that life debt, which again I thought was going to take much longer in the campaign for that to come up. We're like, oh, well, we got to figure out what to do with Cass. And the player has latched onto that NPC somewhat. And he was like, well, I definitely don't want Cass to die, but I also don't want him to necessarily walk out of the campaign completely right now. But I also didn't want that NPC to just be in a holding pattern and just kind of like be around. So give him something to do. So I was like, okay, well, here's a good thing. So Cass, he has, I'm not going to pull it out. It's in my bag behind me. I'm not going to pull it out, but I have a little background thing for Cassian, the character, the NPC. And one of the things that he has is that he has calligraphy proficiency. So it's like, okay, well, this is a good place for him to just kind of like hang out. So he's just not just hanging around the party like a lost puppy dog. So he's like, oh, well, Cass gets a job. And we laughed about it after the session because we have, the NPC is the most normal person. He shows up at town and immediately gets a job and sets himself up. And the rest of you are just kind of running around being crazy adventurer people. Doing weird things, making people uncomfortable. So, he did get set up as a clerk, and they learned that basically the apothecary's assistant, who helped with a bunch of the paperwork, left him in the lurch, is gone. They did not investigate further as to why that is, or anything about that. That's one of the things that happens a lot as you're a dungeon master. Game master is like, we're going to throw out some breadcrumbs. Are you going to follow that trail? Do I have anything planned for that? I have ideas, but I don't have a plan. I have an idea. I have a couple of ideas of something and how to tie that potentially to other things that are going on. But I didn't have any specifics. Because I didn't know if they were going to run down that rabbit hole. They didn't. So they didn't pick up on that. They didn't ask for any more. And they didn't immediately ask for any work, too, because there was a place where they could have gotten some work here. So I put down here, they could gather some sponges. Then I put medicine? From the marsh that's west of Ghazi Fazil's keep. So they didn't ask them for any sort of job, or try to look into any of that. So they didn't learn about that. But they could always go back and do that. And that would be, I tried to give them a lot of very low stakes, very easy things that they could accomplish, because one of the main things they said from the prior session, going into this, one of the things they were looking for is they're looking to recoup some money. They spent most of their starting out money. I've been slowly but surely bleeding them dry of resources. And the way that I run D&D in general is it's a very cash poor game. In their last sort of adventure they tried to do, they got paid, what did they get paid? They got paid like 2 silver pieces a piece and 1 consumable item. But 2 silver pieces a piece, which is not much walking around money. And stuff be expensive. And now they've walked into a town that's really full with people with the upcoming festival, so inflation is out the roof. And they came up with that in this very next thing, which is actually where they went. They did the physician first, actually. They did not do the apothecary first. They did the physician first, which I knew they were going to do. Which is, we're going to change this. I wrote down physician, but it's actually the barber. See if I can remember how to spell it. Is it that? I can't remember if there's an R before the G or not. Is that how you spell surgeon when you spell it the old-fashioned way? No, there's not, right? It's surgeon? No, that doesn't look right either. I can't remember how to spell it. Maybe that's right. Anyways, they went and visited the barber surgeon because we have 2 player characters that are injured, and those were both here. So they looked at Swain's leg and Severin's arm, and it was 4 gold apiece for each of them. Have it looked at, and they got some ointment and fixed up a little bit. These are lingering injuries, so the way that we're running the game, if you're this first time that you're looking at this, is that when you get KO'd in any sort of encounter, there's some sort of lingering injury that comes out of that. So Swain's got a broken leg, and Severin's got a real nasty acid scar on his arm from the black pudding they fought. Or not black pudding. He kept calling it a black pudding, or they kept calling it a black pudding. It's a gray ooze. They fought a gray ooze, not a black pudding. Different creature. Very similar, just a palette swap, really. But, and I also didn't do this, and we're going to have to do that next time. So, I'm going to have to leave a little note for myself, but we did do this part. Ultra 5. Because we did not roll for their injury at the end, because we're using the usage die thing, and resource die, whatever you want to call it. We're using that system to deal with these. To show them slowly healing up. But I forgot to have them roll it at the end of the session, so I'll have them roll it at the beginning of the next session. I'm going to start prepping my next notes. Let's see, other things that happened Broken 7, that was another thing that I did. And so we're doing the one-room DCs, as we talked about. So everything they wanted to do in here was DC 12. Everything at the Barber Surgeons was DC 15. And everything they do at the Broken 7 was DC 14, in general. So, the Broken 7 is this private gambling club, and I think they are starting to realize, players are starting to realize, hopefully I'm communicating that well, is that there's more, this is more than a private gambling club. This is clearly, it seems once they get in and they've started talking to people and looking at things, they've used terms like gilder, and they don't know particularly what that means. They haven't really gone off and just asked somebody what a gilder is. They've just kind of been pretending, or some of the PCs have been pretending like they know what a gilder is. But there is this idea that we're kind of setting up, that the Broken 7 is clearly a front for something. Probably for some sort of illegal activity. So they have their special coin that allows them entrance. They do that. There was not supposed to be any +1s. They do have a little bit of an altercation. I wrote down the wrong NPC. Luckily, my player reminded me that that's not Japheth, that's Rachma. Totally different NPC. I forgot that Rachma was on the ferry. And so I saw Japheth's name and went, oh, Japheth. That's a me problem. But my player's keeping me honest, which is helpful. So they went in, they did a little bit of gambling. And we did get to the bare knuckle boxing. Zarnok actually came back, and that's our Dragonborn fighter, came back and actually did a couple of bare knuckle boxing matches. And earned a little coin and maybe a little bit of reputation for themselves there as well. As like we said, this is clearly a front for something, and they're starting to get that idea. And now they see that, you know, there's this new person in town who can throw a few punches and knock a few people out. Might be some muscle that maybe they'll call upon for some sort of thing. So we did not get down here because Swain cheated during their gambling, got caught, got kicked out immediately. So they didn't do this part down here. So they didn't get any of this information because they got kicked out. And they got their entrance coin taken away. But Rachma came back and was like, here, told Zarnok they'd find them later. Let's see, things that happened at the Fiend Leviathan, so I'm going to go ahead and... They did not talk to Belith either. And that was going to be a whole thing. They ended up talking to Bruno instead, which is the doorman. They did not get anywhere close to Belith. Okay. Alt-Shift 5, there we go. And they did do the bare knuckle boxing. So Zarnok has made them a name for themselves in those sort of exhibition matches. They made a little bit of coin. Probably, certainly more coin than anybody else did during the session. I don't think anybody else made any money. And they went down to, let's see, the Fiend Leviathan. Swing did not go there. Severin did go there and did feel, in fact, the presence behind them move away as they cross the temple threshold. The Fiend Leviathan is a temple to the cat, which is one of the gods in this setting. And one of the primary aspects of the cat is what they do is they represent monsters in the wilderness, and specifically warding off monsters. So, we know that there is something in... Oopsie doodle. We know that there is something in Severin's backstory, coming up with that character, that is a malicious entity that is... I'm going to use the word haunt, but that not to mean that to construe... Let's use the term terrorize. Instead, has been terrorizing Severin and Severin's family for some time. And it's not until he crosses that threshold does it feel like, for the first time and maybe a while, he feels kind of suspiciously alone. Like, you never realized you were alone until you were alone. I was like, ooh, okay. So that they could learn about the Euphorium, but Sniz wasn't there. That was something for Sniz, and so I did not bring that up. Severin was there for their own reasons. So Ultra Funk, so we're gonna bring that back because that we'll save that for next time if they go to learn about that. Because they did not go to the Euphorium, which is the place where the orchestra was tuning up. They went to the Pole and Pike. They did not talk to Lily, which is fine. They did learn about the giant kin raiders. Surprisingly, it is not the person who's been banging on about the giants who learns about it is in fact Severin. And then proceeds to not tell the person who's interested in the giants about the giants so far. But they didn't learn about any of this other stuff yet. They did see the funeral procession go all the way down to the docks. And was headed... They did not see it get on the ferry, but they learned that it got on the ferry. They learned that from... what's her face? Oh, Shmas Kadisha. Who is the... She's like an acolyte. She's a servant of the Fanged Leviathan Temple. She was down at the docks doing her thing that she does at the docks. That we talked about last time. Where she takes care of sort of like these big sort of on the ballards on the wharf. These really nasty fish gargoyle kind of things. They kind of look like the... like imagine them as across somewhere between sort of like a Pacific Northwest totem pole kind of creature, a European gargoyle, and the sort of temple guardian dogs from like Chinese temples. Kind of like that's kind of the style, like this very sort of caricatured thing, and there's these nasty fish, fanged fish that are carved into the tops of these ballards that are on the wharf, and she lacquers them up as part of her duty as a devotee to the cat temple for warding off monsters. So, let's see. They didn't learn about any of this other stuff. They did come up with the half-elves, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Any of this interscene fluff didn't come up. They did come across the Bloody Heather, but not that. But I will go ahead and mark that off because it didn't. Well, actually, I'm not. I'm not, because that's in that's on the other. It's actually in my town notes. They did come across the Bloody Heather, though, which is a sort of a large mercenary company within the world that has the closest analog is something like the Shintarim from Faerun, but not quite the same. The Shintarim are kind of just, or the Black Company is just kind of, I mean, they're on the lightest side of evil, just outright. So they're better than that generally, and they're not as organized as the Shintarim are. But similar. Very similar vibe. But they didn't learn about any of this interesting fluff. That was my fault. I didn't bring that up because my players did the thing that my players do, which is they get to a location and they all break up and scramble in different directions. So I need to be... I've let them get off the hook for a while now by not having them roll for random encounters. So I need to dial that back in because I think they're getting a little too comfortable running around just by themselves. So we're gonna dial that back in and be like, hey, if you guys wander around as out-of-towners in a town you don't know, I mean, somebody's probably gonna take advantage of you. Somebody's gonna try to corner you at some point and try to beat the crap out of you and take all your money and stuff. It's gonna come up. So, but we didn't do any of these. I do want to make sure that this one comes up. So, this will probably be the first one that comes up next time because I think this is going to lead into... I have an idea for something that may happen during the festival, and I want to make sure that I throw this foreshadowing out first, which is the toe-to-toe religious rhetoric debate that threatens to devolve into a brawl, where you have two people who are talking about the firestorms that are happening, and whether those are natural disaster or unexplained phenomena. So is this representative of two different gods, essentially? And so I do want them to get into that to reinforce that, hey, the firestorms are happening, the wildfires are happening. We didn't use any of our NPCs this time, which is nice. And we didn't really have any random encounters. They really didn't get any random encounters. They rolled close to them. We rolled a couple of 2s, but not any 1s. And they didn't pick up any treasures. And then down here at the bottom, which is something that I did for this session, is that since I had to come up with new random encounters now that they're in town, I went ahead and jumped in and just made a quick sheet with just basic stats for some of these creatures. Just make it much easy. So the way that I try to run my games, and have been trying to run my games for a while now, is trying not to use digital resources, but it's also hard because I don't want to bring like a whole bunch of books with me, especially when I'm playing at a situation. So our last game was not at our usual place where we play our game, and then so we're actually playing in sort of a seating area, like living room area, so I don't have a big table to like spread stuff out on. So I'm trying to minimize the amount of stuff that I just have with me, like in my lap, that I'm trying to flip back through. So trying to take what I think are the most common monsters that I might need, or similar monsters that I might need for anything like this, and kind of consolidate them down. And I could actually probably consolidate this list down a little bit more. Like, there's really not that much difference between a bandit and a guard. I could have probably used one for both of those. Pulled that down. Just like there's probably not that much difference between, and the cultists too. I could have used the cultists. Those are all 3 very similar stat blocks. They're not that different. Primarily the difference is their weapon. And I can just give a humanoid any weapon, or any armor if I want to. Just like I could have probably consolidated giant crab and giant rat together if I really wanted to. Could have consolidated probably warrior and apprentice wizard. They kind of do different things though, so maybe not. And I probably could have consolidated this Swagan warrior with the bandit and giant rat, or bandit and guard and stuff if I wanted to as well. But those have not come up yet. And then the thugs, which they decided not to fight, despite deciding that saying that they want combat. Then given the prospect of a fight, and then deciding to use their social powers to get around that. Which very successful, by the way. And I really love that our fighter, who does not have charisma, jumped in there and was like, oh, well, I'm going to take the lead on this. And I was 100% down for that. And I'm glad that it worked out for them. Getting the advantage from thaumaturgy helps a lot in situations. So it's always nice when you see 2 PCs come together to help each other out to accomplish something. That's definitely something that I try to angle for in my games, is like try to get you guys to work together to accomplish things. So yeah, that's all the prep for the session. So as usual, I found with this, and every group's a little bit different, but this is a larger group, so it doesn't require as much prep, and we didn't even get through a bunch of this stuff. We didn't even get through, and this is not all of what they did. They actually did quite a few other things. We'll do that, but they do get through about a page and a half of prep for me. I realized that that's about the sweet spot for me. So that ends about right here, and then everything below this is just improv stuff, interesting fluff. This is just stuff they can come across while they're wandering around. Some random NPCs. If I need to pull an NPC, they want to know more specifics about an NPC. I've got 6 of them here. I can roll on the table, or I can just grab one, whatever I feel like makes the most sense for whatever they're talking about. Even that Rockma character that shows up, which was their way into the Broken 7, that was a random character from Session 2. They ran into that I just pulled out of this list and was like, oh, this is the person, and they talk to you about this thing. So there's a lot of those. You never know what you're going to need, so I like having this. I like it better than just the name list, though one of the things I am doing is I'm bringing Xanathar's Guide to Everything in it, but I'm primarily bringing it just for name lists. And I just need a name. And so, rather than bring a whole book, I may look at just kind of printing out a list or something. I may just make a little sheet that's got some names on it, maybe from a few different of the species, and toss that together. That may be easier for me than bringing an entire book basically for a handful of tables, instead just knocking those out, which I think will be easier. Maybe. I'm not sure how I feel about that because they're spread across like 6 different pages, right? 6 to 8 pages. So that's a lot of pages to have. I don't know. I'm gonna have to mull on that one a little bit. Let's do our actual notes. So I have actual session notes written down. How many notes did I take? So in the session, I took about that much, which is just a little paragraph. Usually I start out pretty good with my notes, and then it devolves into me running the game and then forgetting to take notes. That is something that happens. So one of the things that I do is that after the session, as soon as possible, I try to sit down and just write out everything that I remember about it in a bullet point list. And so when I did that, it starts just down here at the very bottom, and then picks up basically another sheet of paper. And then that's just highlighting most of the important stuff. There's probably some unimportant stuff in here. But now I'm going to take this and we're going to type it up real quick. So you'll get an idea of what actually happened during the session. The blow by blow. So let's do that. I'll probably be moving the mic a lot because I got to type and look at my notes. So let's start it down here. Where do I want to do this? Because now I've got 2 columns down here, so let's do this. I'm gonna yeah, let's do it here. So I'm just gonna insert this here. Okay, that's gonna do straight through. And I'll do session notes, and I'm going to unbold that, but we are gonna go ahead and make it a heading just so we have it. The session notes, and let's get started. All right. It was first, so the cast got called a Spoonier, actually got, usually got hit in the back of the head with a rock. Didn't do a particular lot of damage, but did get hit in the back of the head with a rock. It's called Spoonier and gets accosted by the half-elf sailors behind them in the gate queue. Severin goes and grabs somebody out of the carriage, which ends up being Zarnok, our big Dragonborn fighter, and he defused it with the intimidation check, and Severin thaumaturgy spell. So yeah, thought for sure that would be a nice way to open the thing. We tried to do it. We tried to start with those purposeful starts. That's another sort of return to the lazy dungeon master thing. Try to like immediately, as quickly as possible, to kind of get the players into the action. So this one actually had them start by doing the inside the carriage, so that way it would be like, okay, this is what you guys are doing while the stuff outside is happening, because I didn't want to get in a situation where it's like, oh, this happens, and then everybody just immediately piles out of the carriage. That's not what I was trying to do, because that was not the vibe I was going for. So I did actually do a soft lead and just be like, okay, you guys have been riding with Pearl in this carriage for a while, so you've had an opportunity to talk to her. Are there any specific things that you want to know about the town? Because you would have had time to ask her about it. So, and there was nothing of particular note that they wanted to know from Pearl, really, or at least they did not ask her any things that were general information about the town. They were like more specific things that a courtesan probably wouldn't know. She gave them as good of an answer as she could. But then we bounced out. And then we bounced out and did that stuff with the cast. They got in. Oh, yeah, they peace tie their weapons, they strip their armor, they pay their gate toll, they get into town, and they stay overnight at the Pearlstown house. Again, they did some perception checks there and there, but none of that was of particular note, especially since they decided not to do that. Let's see. They saw the death procession. Again, the death procession is not particularly of note. This is something that's in, if you've watched some of my other videos and you've seen me do show off the DM binder, one of the things that I have is just a roll table for like, hey, what's going on in town when you show up in town or you spend time in town. And one of those things is there's some sort of event happening. In this case, it was a death. And so rather than have it be like a weird funeral they came across, I was like, it's a death procession, and realized that they were taking people out. So they assumed that that is an important person. That was not an assumption that I had made, because they thought it was weird that there was a funeral procession through the streets for just an average person. I'm not sure why they think that's weird. We do that today. There's like funeral motorcades all the time. So it seems weird to me that they think that's weird. But they haven't investigated that. So if they want to investigate it, I can make it somebody important. Or somebody of note. Again, the way that I'm sort of running this, and I kind of told them this at the end of the session, is that, hey, the way that we set up this campaign, the way that we talked about it beforehand when we did our sort of input session and those questionnaires for those responses that I did actually get, was that they wanted a very player-forward, player-driven campaign as opposed to a sort of DM-driven, very narrative campaign. So it's kind of up to you guys to decide what you want to focus on. And when you focus on something, then I will make that important. I will make that the story. But until you guys sort of like narrow your focus in on something, you're just kind of scattershotting around. So I did try to reaffirm that with them again this time. Again, talking about, hey, you have only so much amount of time now before the festival begins. So if you want to go on a proper adventure, now's the time to kind of do that, especially if it's not in town, if that's what you want to focus on. So that's a discussion we have with them. Or I can take it back over and take narrative control, and then we can have a narrative-based campaign. But that is not the setup that we said that we wanted for the campaign, so I haven't done that. Okay, Severin and Swain get treated by the barber. They're gonna feel the inflation of prices. So they got to see that firsthand. They also have been ripped off a few times in the campaign already. So I did want to put them in a position where you guys have made it very, very clear often that you are travelers and you're not from here. And as is the case, you get into the tourist trap stuff and you pay a lot more for not particularly valuable goods and services. So people recognize you're from out of town and they overcharge you. And if you're willing to pay it, you're willing to pay it. So they do that. They delivered that, and they learned a little bit about the letter. So we'll do that. So they delivered, I'll say Takesha's. Carrie learned, she requested or just put a buttload of poison. I'm gonna say aerated. So she's basically just gonna go bug bomb the Sturgis rather than send her men down in the hole, which was the whole thing. So if you watch some of the previous things where they talked about, and she and Swain got into, well, they did not leave that encounter in the greatest graces of the Ghazi. We'll see if that comes back up again. Spoiler alert, it's probably going to come back up again. Especially because Swain has continued to basically, is almost on a mission to see how much trouble he can get in in the shortest amount of time without just overtly just doing crimes in front of guards. He is quickly in the process of pissing off the power structures in place. They learned about that. Cass, we'll put this down here. So and they talked to Cass Swain, who's been interested in recouping some of the money. They spent a lot of money so far in the campaign. He goes, oh well, you know, how much are you getting paid? First thing they asked was like, are you getting paid? He's like, yeah, of course I'm getting paid. And they're like, okay, so how much are you getting paid? And he's like, oh, I'm getting paid 2 gold a day, which is, by the way, significantly more money than they have pretty much earned over this campaign. Any single PC has earned over this campaign, with the exception of any sort of gambling that they've done and won on. But as far as just like, again, they got paid 2 silver for the true adventure that they kind of bailed on. Definitely could have made a lot more money, but they didn't hang around to do that. So Swain's a little crestfallen to learn that, hey, I have a learned trade and I can practice that trade and make a decent living. So he gets paid, it was basically 2 gold a day, which the way that I do that is kind of the going rate for somebody who's got a trained labor to work on something. So 1 gold a day for unskilled labor, 2 gold a day for skilled labor, 4 gold a day for like expert labor. So if you ask for, like if they were going to hire the apothecary to make something, and rather than do the goods pricing, they wanted they just wanted to pay his day rate, that would be 4 gold a day. Assuming they provided all the stuff, and then there's extra money they make. There are multipliers on their day rate based off of like, hey, am I providing the tools to do my thing? Am I providing materials to do it? Because then that goes up as well. If you're interested in learning more about that, go ahead and drop it down in, and maybe we'll talk about that. I can talk a little bit about the pricing and how I came up with the pricing and why I do it that way. If you're interested in that. I don't know if you are or not. Only one way to find out, and that's by you leaving a comment. Alright. So they live with that. Swain and Zarnok go to the Broken Seven. Yeah, Swain cheats and gets kicked out. Broken Seven. Swain cheats and gets caught. And they get kicked out. One of the things that I talked to them about, I think pretty much right after this, after they get kicked out of that scene, is let them know that, hey, you have entered this area. This town is a sizable town, and different areas of the world, this is how I prep sort of a sandbox, have different kind of APLs attached to them, average party levels for like things that happen in there. And they are first level adventurers, and they are in an APL 7 location. So I'm like, so I let them know, it's like it's unlikely that you're ever going at this level that you're at, that you're going to get, you don't have the social clout to get in front of anybody particularly important. But that also means that if you piss people off, like Bruno could probably beat the crap out of both of you. Like he's gonna be high enough. He's like the big enforcer of the Broken Seven. He's a powerful guy. He can snap your guys' necks, especially as level 1 adventurers. So just keep that in mind when you make decisions. There are plenty of low-level people that you can deal with, and there's plenty of adventure to be had here, like low-level, level 1 adventure, like tier adventure levels 1 through 4 adventure to be had here. It just can't be the big people, and you want to give them a wide berth and stay out of their vision, essentially, or slowly start to ingratiate yourself with them. So, I'm gonna put that kicked out by Bruno. Swain to come back later. Sorry. So this is actually to visit him later with pearls. He ends up jumping the shark on that, or jumping the gun, I should say. It actually comes back later, but we'll do that in a second. So they do that. What was Severin doing during that time? Severin bought a hat. Or basically bought a hat from the market to cover Cass's ears, since they've now come across Cass actually being singled out as being human in the area. They also have Caleb in the party, who is not human but looks human. And so that may also come up for Caleb yet. They haven't really run across that yet, but it's going to start running across them. They're going to start running across sort of this speciesist attitude towards humans, because you're in the one part of the world where there are basically not any humans. So they're going to have to deal with that. It's not going to be like every single interaction. I don't want it to be that. I don't want it to be like a major focus. But every once in a while, yeah, they're going to come across it. It was session 6 before it even happened. And they've talked to a bunch of people. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So, Severin... Well, not Severin. Swain did win there. And we talked about this last time. What happens to... What happens to Swain's croupier? So the croupier is the person who runs the table at gambling establishments. If you're not familiar with that word, you can also just refer to them as a dealer. They were playing dice, so... But that is the person who takes care of the bets, deals the cards, all that stuff. That's the croupier. Or croupier. So, one of the things that we talked about was Swain's power and why this devil's not recognizing him, and I want this to be something that Swain, the player of Swain, starts to figure out. Is that, because it happened last time just by accident, and I decided, oh, well, that's a cool thing, so I'm going to latch onto that. He's made a deal with the devil, and he doesn't know what the devil gets out of the deal yet. He got money out of it, but he doesn't know what the devil got out of it. So, what we latched onto is that the last person that he gambled with successfully ended up dead. And so there's this idea that when he beats somebody in gambling, that the devil like siphons some of that person's luck away. And so we got to figure out what happens to Swain's croupier, because he did technically win twice, right? Twice. 2 of his 3 goes at gambling in there. So I got to figure out what happens to him. We'll see. See, Severin about that. And then we move on. Upside down. Here we go. With Severin and Swain visit Kadaji at the docks. Yeah. So we took a little break. We did the thing where we had to kind of jump back in time just because somebody stepped out for a second to take care of something. So they all met at the Pull and Pint. Meet up at Pull and Pint, which is the big sort of like tavern and inn in town. And so Severin was there first. Learns of Giantkin readers, but doesn't share it with Zarnak, who is the person who's actually interested in the Giants. And then we kind of jump back in time to be like, oh, well, they actually went and did this thing first. So Severin, or I guess we kind of jump forward, so we'll do it this way. And Zarnak kind of goes, leave me up at the Pull and Pint. They have a drink. They discuss everything they've kind of done so far, kind of what they want to do next. Have that sort of meet up. Like I said, my players have their group is not particularly cohesive at this point. So they've just been running and gunning individually. Again, this is something that I need to start bringing down the hammer a little bit and kind of sort of pushing them back towards each other and be like, hey, it's very dangerous for you guys to just kind of be running around alone. So I'm going to have to come back and start doing that. So, up. They did that, so Severin and Swain go to the docks. Let's see, they learn about procession to Zayartes Mania, which is, there's a large temple that's actually out in the bay on its own little island. And they found out that the funeral procession did there because they talked to, I should probably put it down here, Shimas, Khadija, who is our kind of acolyte deacon kind of person taking care of the ballards on the dock. Learned that her boss is actually at the temple in the bay, like her priest for their temples there. So she's kind of running the show right now. They learned a little bit about the red tide, or the Moshkoni. Shimoska has this very sort of alt-girl, goth, emo kind of aesthetic to her. And the Moshkani is they learn that she's kind of part of a doomsday cult sect of the cat, which is very interesting. It's the first time they've come across some people like this. And one of the Moshkani, which is the red tide, is going to come and sweep up and essentially will consume all the pretenders. So, you know, very goth emo kind of style, being like, oh well, they can't wait for the day that the Moshkani comes and just eats up all the fakers out there and leaves only us real ones behind. So very silly interaction for them. Let's see, Swain. So Swain talked to the half-elves, the thugs from earlier outside the gate. Comes across them again. They circled back into the narrative just because I needed somebody, and he's looking for some jobs. They were there. He was looking for some sort of like underhanded, gritty, illegal kind of jobs because that's kind of his character. I was like, oh, well, they're the half-elves there, and he kind of lines up with them and then learns that they've got a job at night, and they invite Swain to sort of come in. This is the first time he comes up across the term. He didn't really learn it. He hears the term Gilder. And he tells them that he's been at the Broken Seven. They're like, oh, I didn't realize you were Gilder. And they say that they're freelancers. Now, they don't know that, so the Gilder means that there's some sort of, essentially the Broken Seven is a front. They do a bunch of illegal activities, but they are sort of a thieves guild in a way. I think personally that the concept of a thieves guild is kind of silly. But this is sort of more of a mafioso kind of thing, organization, organized crime kind of thing. A syndicate, if you will. And so that's what they mean by Gilder. But my players don't know that yet. So if you're one of my players, you just got that ruined for you. Why are you watching this? You know we're talking about your campaign. Stop doing that. Why are you here? Get out of here. Get out of here. I'll talk to you guys later. So, learn that about the Broken Seven. I think that's it. So he was gonna meet them behind the fish market after last bell at night. So deep in the night. Basically around midnight. Let's see. They went back to the Pull and Pint. Learned about the giant readers. And then they make their way to Pearl's for the evening. It's basically nighttime now. Swain tips off Pearl about Gilder. But she plays it pretty cool, and he rolls a terrible insight for it. So she does not know what she knows about it. So she has, I'm going to say, a rudimentary understanding of what it is. That a Gilder is essentially in the family business. Like, she understands what that is, because she entertains clients that are part of the Broken Seven. Whether they're part of the Mafia or they're just part of the front establishment with the gambling. Only one way to find out, and that's by playing. So you gotta play, find out. So, that's what we're doing. Let's see. Severin makes pies. While they're doing that, Zarnok heads back to the Broken Seven alone. Catches up with Rachma outside. Enters the exhibition. Matches for bare knuckle boxing. Beats the Pudge, which is the first person, and we did canonically get it here. So enters the exhibition, matches for bare knuckle boxing under the pseudonym Beefcake, which is something that he the player put up with his character. It's like, is their nickname? It's like, well, you can't really come up with your own nickname, right? I mean, people have to give it to you. But this is one of the strange opportunities where you have the ability to kind of make your own nickname. And we kind of played it off as very much sort of like the beginning of Spider-Man, where, you know, he goes to underground wrestling as the Human Spider. The guy's like, that's a terrible name. How about we call you this instead? And so he beats the Pudge, and then he beats Thunder. He gets notice from people as a skillful fighter. And we'll say actually a skillful bruiser. So somebody who can do violence upon people and is skilled at doing it. Again, maybe that's something that people who are in something like organized crime will be interested in. It's almost as if they set up these bare-knuckle exhibitions specifically to find people who can do low-level street work for them. Am I saying that's what's happening and that he's slowly being inducted into it? Yes, that is what I'm saying. So, we'll have to see what happens there. Severin makes the pies, makes a mess. Makes a massive mess in the kitchen. He overextends himself, making both meat pies and a dessert fruit pie. And side salad. You don't need to know about the side salad, but he made a side salad too. Kind of overextends himself. He does pick up exhaustion. He picked it up by then, but we'll just put it down here. And is likely to pick up a second point of exhaustion at the start of the next session, because he's out late at night with Swain. Alright. Hey, how are you doing? Nice to see you. Picking up. We are picking up, talking about our last session that I ran. Let's see. Severin makes the pies. Oh yeah, then it's late at night. So, Zarnok crashes. Zarnok had the snot kicked out of him in his bare knuckle boxing matches. Swain sneaks out. Severin doesn't catch him sticking out, but realizes he's gone. Swain did tell him that he had something to do at night down by the docks, so he did know that aspect of it. So he did know having a general idea of where to go, but didn't have like a trail to follow or anything like that. But that's okay. Swain makes a bunch of noise. Well, Swain and his half-elf companions make a bunch of noise while they're trying to do their thing. Let's see. So Swain and the half-elves, you know, on their let's call it let's go on, say, misadventure. Go on their late night misadventure. So, Swain disguises himself as a half-elf instead of the tiefling, which he is. This is the first time they see that he does magic. They break into Cooperage, which Cooperage is a place where Coopers work. Those are people who make barrels. It's a place where they make barrels. Are there any deaths that you missed? No, not this session. Nobody got close. Zarnok's our closest one who got close to being KO'd, and that's because he was in a couple of bare knuckle boxing matches, but he ended up coming out on top. We're about to see. There might be one death that started next time, but it's probably gonna be an NPC because one of them's getting mauled by somebody's getting mauled by a dog. And they break into the Cooperage and distract dogs. Swain rolled incredibly low. Rolled a not natural one, a dirty one. Swing beans her dog in the head with rations as bait. He did a very clever thing where he's an artificer, so he has his tinkering. So he does it to make some of his rations smell like a juicy steak. And then he was like, okay, I'm gonna throw it in there off to the side to distract the dog. Rolls a 2, has a -1 to strength for throwing it. So rolls a dirty 1. I'm like, all right, you just beam the dog in the head with the bait, and it starts freaking out. But they eventually make their way in. It draws Severin's attention though. And at the front, Cooperage. I should say that. Distract the dogs in the Cooperage yard. Swain runs in and easily easily picks the big barn doors. Big padlock on him, but he rolled like a 21 or something to do that, and I think the DC was like 11. Super low. It was like, yeah, in a second you have that lock off. And they run inside. I felt it's a wet bag. Move forward. They split up to spoil barrels of seafood. Bridge with slimy, nasty, algae covered like seaweed. So they're just spoiling the barrels, pretty much. Stuff in there. Who sent them on this job? He doesn't know. He just knows that he gets paid per barrel that they spoil. Let's see. If for that. I guess this is all kind of the same. Eventually, the overseer is stirred by the dogs going crazy. And comes from office. Swain. Forgetting to put the E on Swain. That's okay. It's fine. I know who it is. Swain, yeah, is it going to hurt bad? Yeah, getting mauled by a dog is clearly not going to be fun. Swain hides in the tool lockup. He found a room to hide in, because otherwise it's just kind of a big workhouse room. So there's not a lot of places to hide. Swain hides in the tool lockup. Messages 1, I'm going to say capital M, because he uses the spell message. Because they split up. So they're all three at different areas of this large open air building. Almost it's almost like an aircraft hangar. It's like an assembly line kind of setup. Like it's just a big room that's open. So they're all in a bunch of different, they're all split up, try to spoil as many of these barrels as they can. So they messages 1 half elf, but only one of them. And then other gets spotted by overseer. And hell breaks loose. And let's see, the half elf tried to run out, but was met by the dog, by one of the guard dogs. Other side. So Swain's plan was to hide in the tool lockup, as long as it takes for everything to die down. He did pass. I did give him a wisdom save, and he did pass the wisdom save to learn that, hey, that's not maybe the greatest idea. He's sort of an underworld kind of character to begin with. So I was like, you know enough about this sort of work to know that there's a likelihood that once they finish whatever this is out in the area, they're going to clear the entire building. So you are in a room that is 1 door in and 1 door out. If you stay here, they're gonna find you. So like at some point you've got to get out of this room. Swain tries to sneak behind the overseer. He was going under a table, I think. But rolled a 5, I believe. And rolls initiative. And that's sort of where we ended. The session went on a little bit longer because I wanted to kind of get into it because I felt like I had Swain a little bit on the side. Swain's player a little bit on the side there while we were doing some of the other stuff, because Zarnok had this moment where he went out and did like 2 bare knuckle boxing matches. Oh, I didn't write down anything about Severin going back to the temple. That was dumb. He headed there because Swain went back to Pearls. So this was actually something that Severin did first. So, go to the Temple of Leviathan. Scares the crap out of an old lady. Doing his disappearing curse, where he sort of filters. It's a little bit like it's a mix between sort of blink and displacement, like a displacer beast has, where he kind of like flits in and out of existence when somebody tries to interact with him. So whether that's an attack or somebody tries to physically aid him in some way or touch him, sometimes he will flit out of existence. So he does that to this old lady while he's trying to talk to her about specifically what this is, and she tries to console him by sort of like rubbing his back, just trying to be a nice little old lady. He blinks out of existence. She freaks the hell out, as you would when you're some stranger you just met that you're just talking to is like, oh, well, I have this problem, and she's thinking that he's talking in sort of like a metaphorical aspect. It's like, yeah, well, we all sometimes feel invisible, and it's like, that doesn't mean that you're worth less, and those sorts of things where she's trying to be a consoling, nice little old lady, and then he just blinks out of existence, and she starts freaking out. And then starts defacing property when he gets back in, because he has this sort of, it's his sort of like stim thing that he does when he gets back to deal with this. And talks with Khadijah about it. She is going to prep a lodestone for him. And and then Severin fails his animal handling check with the temple cats. There's some temple cats around here. It is a temple to the cat as the god, and there are a number of cats that just hang around. They're a sort of feral cat Japanese shrine style. They just kind of hang around in the city. And especially because they get offerings that are brought to Cat Temple of things like milk and cream and things of that nature, leaning into sort of the cat aspect. And so it is likely that Khadijah or the priest puts out these saucers of cream for the cats. That keeps plenty of wild cats around, street cats around, tomcats. So yeah, that was the whole session. So not too much happened. The end got real spicy, and so that's where we're going to pick up. We ran a little bit over time because I wanted to make sure, like I said, Zarnak went to go do his fights, Severin went to go off to do the temple thing, and I was going to end it when they got back to Pearls, but then I was like, Swain's character, the player playing Swain's character had just been kind of sitting on their thumbs a little bit, letting each of those two do their own thing, so I wanted to make sure that he got an opportunity to do something before the end of the session. So we ran a little bit longer, and so I thought this was going to be a real simple thing, but it ended up being a little bit more complicated because that's how the rolls go. And so we're going to pick up next time, and I'm going to make this something so it's not just him, because most of this was him. So I'm going to let everybody else, all the other players that are at the table, come in, and they are going to they're going to come in and they'll play some of the other people. So I'll probably have people play the half-elf, somebody play the overseer, somebody's going to probably handle the dogs, and Severin, I should put this down. And because this happens right before that. Noticing the noise, Severin calls out at the docks for help, saying that someone is being attacked by dogs. One person over to help. Question mark on who? This could be a guard. Could be bringing a guard to this fight. Could be bringing somebody else. Don't know. No. A cat temple. Love it. But how powerful would a cat god be? As powerful as all the others. So the gods in this setting, in this world, are very amorphous. So they don't have names like something like Faerun does. Like, there's no Malora. They don't have like this is a specific person. It's more like they are concepts, and they are sometimes conceptualized in very different ways. So sometimes they're conceptualized as animals. And so the cat is one of these things, because the cat is considered, thinking about a cat that hunts rodents, and thinking about like wild jungle cats that represent predators and threats specifically to humans. So the cat is the manifestation of that, because one of the things is that god's purview falls within the great wilderness and monsters in general, and the threat of monsters. So they are wards against monsters, They are wards against ignorance and darkness. And basically everything that happens outside of civilization is most of the purview of the cat. So, pretty powerful. Actually in charge of a lot of stuff in the world. And definitely somebody you want on your side. And speaking of which, that does remind me, we talked about it earlier when I was going over the prep. Every time I do this and every time I read over this, I feel like there's another thing that I need to put down. So it's a normal cat with great power. Yeah, exactly. Now they are actually they're at a dock town, so it's actually a temple of Leviathan. So the cat is the god, but the aspect that they're using is an arapaima. So a very large fanged fish. But it's still the cat. Yeah. Same god, different aspect of it. And that's why they have these gargoyle sort of things that are sitting up at the docks that ward off spirits from the docks. Yeah, Leviathan. Big ol' fish. What was I going to say? Oh, this is for Severin. When he goes in, as he crosses the threshold, he feels a presence move away from behind him. Entity that so Severin, his character, has this amorphous dark creature, energy, curse, unsure, that terrorizes like people, like his entire family, not just him. But he realizes, like, as he moves over the threshold, specifically into a temple of the cat that wards off things like monsters, that he feels that presence leave him, like it cannot follow him within once he crosses into sort of like sacred ground, sanctified area. Well, envy it is then. So, yeah, that's it. So we could do a little bit. We can take a little bit of prep. I don't want to spend too much time. I've been going for about 2.5 hours. So we'll do a little bit. I'll set up the stuff for the next session, but I don't think we're going to go into here. It always takes me a little bit longer to go over things, and I didn't have a chance to write the notes beforehand this time. Usually I try to do the session notes before we do the stream, but it didn't work out this time. I was too busy dealing with internet issues. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do... I got to do it up here. We're going to add a new subtab. I'm going to take this guy over here. I'm actually not going to change any of the weather stuff because our druid wasn't there, and that's the only person who cares about the weather stuff. So we're just going to leave the weather as it is. Technically, it's Spring Maiden 55 because it's past midnight now. It's after midnight. I can't remember what day of week that is. Wednesday, Hydra. Is it Fire's Day? Maybe Fire's Day. I'd have to look up the calendar. And I'm not going to do that. Well, I could do it real nice. But I can't show you guys that because I don't know what all's in there. Let me go look at it real quick. We can find it out. What day of the week is it, Hydra? Oh, no, it's Souls Day. Okay. Just copy that there. I didn't realize that's what day it was. Okay. Important to know. Important to know that it's Souls Day. Let's go back to space. There we go. Ba-ba. Alright, not bolded. I was wondering if it was Souls Day. It is, in fact, Souls Day. Go ahead and put that. There you go. Souls Day. Alright, somebody is out next time. Who is out? It's one of my players. I know it's not Severin. Oh, it's Zarnok. Zarnok's out. Zarnok's out next time. Everybody else presumably should be there. We'll see. So that's gonna be Caleb. Caleb Severin, Sway. And the sniz. The sniz will be there. And it's the last day. So they are digging ditches. And then it's going to be... You know, I should have brought that back up, but that's okay. Not going to do it. They're going to move on to something else. So those should have finished. I think they're planting. I believe that's what's coming next. So they finished digging the field ditches. They should be moving on to planting spring cereals. All right. Well, we're going to pick it up with a hot start. So we're going to pick it up with the... With the Cooperage kerfuffle. Oh, when is the moon eclipse? They just went through a new moon. So they're coming up on waxing crescent. Off the top of my head, I'd have to go pull out the calendar where I have my notes on it written by hand, so it's not part of the one I have saved. So I don't know off the top of my head when the bloody moon or next eclipse is. I would have to go look at that specifically. I don't think it's anytime soon though. I think, and they just had their new moon. Because that is important to one of my PCs. But the night was not dark, the stars were out, which was good for them. So I didn't have to worry about that aspect of the void. What do we want the DC to be here? Let's just do this 6. Alright, we'll do that. Alright, DC 12. I'm good with that. That's our one scene DC. DC 12. Alright, what do we got going on here? Alright, we've got 2 half-health thieves. I'll put them down as bandits, because they're going to be bandits. We've got 2 mastiffs, which are our guard dogs. We've got 1 overseer. Should the overseer just be a commoner? I don't think so. I think the overseer should be better than a commoner. That's the person you leave in charge overnight at the place. They're probably going to be beefier than just a dude. But I'll ask the oracle. I think it's likely, so +3. Oh yeah, that's 20. So this is okay. So then this person's tough. I'm gonna say that this person is then. Well, let me ask again. Is this person tougher than a thug? Yes. Alright, so that means that, because the thug is... Here. Thug's a half. So I need a humanoid. So I'm going to need a humanoid that's 1. CR1. What is a CR1 humanoid? Use. We could use a bugbear. We could have that stand in. That would work pretty well. Oh, man. A CR1 bugbear would be really nasty, though. He's going to have friends with him. Probably not the flesh gnar. Maybe goblin boss. Let's look at the goblin boss. Let's do this. Goblin boss. Change your shield. That's pretty high up, though. 2 attacks with a scimitar. I did say that he has a truncheon, though. He definitely has a truncheon. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to use the redirect attacks. I really can't use anything with that. What's the Kuoto whip? Kuoto whip. pincher staff. Oh, it's like a man catcher. No, that doesn't really work either. Well, silly billies. Let's just look in here. So we need somebody who's... We need somebody who is a type humanoid. Let's see what this is going to give us too. It'll give us some different options. Let's do it by CR. Warforged Soldier. We can maybe use that. Change that around. Pirate First Mate, that's a pretty good one. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll use the Pirate First Mate, or maybe just Pirate. What's the difference? No, we're not using anything with that. Ooh, I like this one. Can choose to disarm the target. Yeah, maybe we'll try to knock Swain's... Yeah, because he saw Swain cast a spell at him, and then he rushed him. So yeah, I like that one of the things that he'll try to do is try to disarm Swain's from his magic foci. His magic focus, his arcane focus, to do spell casting. Because then you're just in a fight with a dude with a truncheon, and he's going to beat the snot out of you. Alright, so I like that. So we're going to use Pirate First Mate. We're going to use that stat block. So, who else do we have in this fight? We have, we have Swain. We have, potentially Severin. And we have a +1. Is the blood moon important, or the moon phases specifically? The moon phases are specifically important. We have a character who deals with the void, which is a different god in the world. And the void has some things get oogie woogie when the night's pitch black in the darkest night, when you can't see the stars. And the void is of extreme importance. Weird stuff sometimes happens. So new moons can be really dangerous when there's not a lot of light, and especially if it's like overcast and cloudy. But this last new moon, the skies were clear and you could really see the stars, so that was not an issue. But it could be an issue when it comes up. But just not right now. So, not yet. So we've got our +1 who's coming in here to help. So let's see. And then I'll have to figure out what all this is. As far as CR to try to, or the encounter building, and try to figure out how that was going to work. So let's see. Let's ask our Oracle question. So let's ask, hey Oracle, is the person who's running over to Severin a guard? I don't know. No. Are they a Bloody Heather? One of the mercenaries? Maybe. Maybe. We know that they've been brought in as sort of like extra constabulary police force. Policing. So, yeah, I think actually maybe that's more likely. So +3. Okay, so it is Bloody Heather. +1. So Bloody Heather Merc. Which I think is going to be... It's probably pretty close. I was envisioning something like a veteran. Soldiers down here at a half. They could be just a soldier too. Chainmail, shield, which is what they have. Longsword, multi-attack, formation tactics. That all sounds like right up his alley. Hey, there's Coalinth. These are actually in the campaign I'm playing in tomorrow, where I'm just a player. We have these Coalinth, who are sort of like watery hobgoblins, sort of. As well as some Lokatha and some Merfolk. Double Lokatha. We are big fans of the Lokatha. Our PCs are. We like them a lot. They are very cute. Vistana for hug. No, let's go with the Dragon Army Soldier. No, we're gonna go with just straight up. Where was it? Straight up Soldier. That makes sense. So they're actually a half CR. So they're actually not, because this is just a dude or a dudette. We do not know yet. I'm just gonna put just so I remember that it's a. And this guy was a CR1. So the Overseer is a pretty big bruiser, but he's easier to hit. He's gonna be easier to hit because he's not gonna have a lot of armor on. The Bloody Heather Merc is not gonna hit as hard, but is armored up, and it's definitely not somebody they want to get on the bad side of. Alright, I think this is gonna be everybody who's gonna be in this fight. Encounter. So if we look at this, alright, so Severin will be playing Severin. Swain will be playing Swain, which means that we have Sniz and Caleb who are going to be here because they weren't here in this last session. They're not going to be in this combat specifically. They're going to kick it off with. So, who is going to play who? I'm going to let one of them play the half-elf bandits. I'm going to let one of them be the half-elf bandits. I'm going to probably play the Overseer. Because I kind of want them to all be on the same side for the most part. And no, one of them's going to have to play the Mastiffs. Because I think I'm going to do the Bloody Heather Merc. Because they're not going to know. Because it's more of a world building thing. So I don't think that's appropriate to give to them. No, you know what? I am going to give the Bloody Heather Merc to him. I'm going to give that to Sniz. Character who plays Sniz. I'm going to make him figure that out. And I'm going to let Caleb, player who plays Caleb, they're going to do the half-elves. And that way I'm only in charge of the Overseer and the Mastiff. And that will give player who plays Severin and the player who plays Sniz, they can have their tete-a-tete, they can have their little talk outside because that's who's running up to it. I will give Caleb's player in charge of the half-elf bandits, and I will have the Mastiffs for mauling them and the Overseer who is going after them. Yeah, that all works. That all works. That's all perfect. So that's the Cooperage Kerfuffle. Aspects. So we have the work tables. So these are just things that could be important. And we've got the barrel racks. What's another aspect? What's something else that could be in this room? They could maybe make use of. I'd like to give them one more. They've got the windows, but they're set up. Oh, there could be a weapon there? I'm trying to think, because all the tools should be in the tool lockup. And everybody should have a weapon, is also the thing. Maybe the half-elf bandits. I could give the bandit something interesting, though. That's a good point. Let's see. Do we have anything? Oh, there's nothing there. Thinking maybe something. They could have some. Alchemist fire would be a bad idea. They'd light this place on fire. It's basically one big tinder twig. Interesting. Barking box. That one's a new one for me. Brick pipe spell. There should be some lumber in there. I'm not sure if that's going to be useful for anything. Something else they could potentially turn to use. Something they could potentially use as a weapon. Maybe some sort of identifier? Maybe something, because we don't know who these people are working for. And there's a chance they could both get killed. Actually, there's a pretty good chance that both of them could get killed by the Mastiffs, because the Mastiffs are... Yeah, I mean, they're the same CR as the half-elves. So there's a chance that they could... especially if they knock him prone and get bites in on prone. There's a chance they could go real south real fast for the half-elves. So that would leave Swain and the rest of them with no idea who hired them and what the payout is. So maybe they need some sort of note. Note or identifier. Yeah, let's do that. So they need some sort of... So now I have to ask myself a question. Is this guild backed? I think that's extremely unlikely. I don't think this is guild backed. Yeah, it's not guild backed, for sure. Now I did have an idea that there's a ship that's going to come in because I wanted to show off the barge aspect of the world building. Holographic magic item, random bullshit, go! Yeah, it could be something like that. It's a pretty fancy implementation. That most of this campaign's been pretty low magic so far, but that is a good point. I do like that. I'm not sure if it's going to be a note. I may just improv it based off it. He's an artificer, so I like that it may be something as an artificer. So maybe a holographic thing does work like it, like it's some sort of token. Let me look at. I'm going to put you guys here so I can pull this back up because I'm not in the right area. Let me pull this up for the Friday night campaign. Let's look at the city. City. I keep calling it the city. Let's look at the town real quick. I'll top back over. Let's look at the town. Because there is somebody. Maybe we can get some ideas here. Not the Broken Seven. Probably not anybody from the... Could be somebody from the Fish Hall. Maybe. Fishwives Hall. Bazaar, the Cooperage, the Cutler, Grog Cellar, Jeweler, Mercer, Smithy, Spice. None of those people really make sense for who would want to screw around with that. Now, I did say, when I was dealing with this, we can jump back here. I said that I did not use the lumber wagon. I could maybe pull the lumber wagon back into this. Maybe the idea is that they didn't need the wood. They didn't need extra wood. So the wagon rolled in with all this lumber, and the Cooperage was like, actually, we don't need the lumber. And so now they have a bunch of wood that they can't sell. So if they spoil the barrels, maybe they can sell the rest of their lumber to making new barrels. let's do that. I like that. That seems like a reasonable reason why they might want this. So they were like, well, we'll just hire these idiots out at the docks to screw up the barrels. But they didn't just go in to destroy the barrels. They went there to found. Okay, let's do it this way. So it could be fishers who are a little late to the game and they want to get their fish on the market and get around the guild. I think that's more likely than the lumber people. So let's say if I roll a 6 or higher, it's going to be some collection of fishers. Alright, well that's quite high. Alright, so that is for sure our fishers. Alright, so that gives us that. That gives us our reason. So, we know who hired them. So, and it makes sense because they picked up, Swain met these guys on the docks. He knows that they're sailors. He knows of them. It's perfectly reasonable that the people that they were hired by some trying to edge out pricing for their next catch. I like that, and that gives them a specific lane that somebody to go to. And I already have something tied for them where there is some side work they can do, which is protecting the fishers and their catches while they're out in the water because they're out there just catch as many fish as they can for the upcoming festival, because the seafood is a big main focus on the upcoming festival, because it's all focused on the Naiad, and it's all like spring and new love and aphrodisiacs, specifically of seafood, to celebrate the Naiad, which is another one of the gods who's in charge of things like love. And so seafood is the aphrodisiac. It's the blossoming of new love and all that stuff. So could just cut off other fish supplies. Yeah, I guess that's true. There's so many people though, and these are maybe just some dudes. Because remember, they're still a level 1 party, so I can't make it like a super huge criminal exploration. And then that gives us some side work to do if they decide to throw in with the local fishers, or if they decide to bring them back around and bring them to justice, then it doesn't have a major impact with what's going on. So that's definitely going to be our first thing, and then after that I'll think about some other stuff that can happen. But I think that's a good place to cut for this stream. We've gone almost, not quite 3 hours, pretty close. But yeah, I think that's going to be the cut off for here. But thanks for hanging out with me. Hopefully it was helpful learning about the one-room DCs that we talked about. It's and so hopefully you enjoyed that and you learned about that and how you can maybe use that in your own prep as a way to sort of approach that, like we did right here. The Cooperage Kerfluffle is going to have the DC 12 for pretty much everything they do in here. We're going to have looked at the prep from last time and talked about sort of how the session went compared to the prep. So you can see that I had some things prepped. We did a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't really in that prep and skipped a bunch of the prep, especially since we had 2 of our player characters out. So we'll have to go back and deal with some of that. So I'll pull some of that information from the last session that we didn't get used back into this session, so that doesn't give me as much I have to prep. So hopefully that'll all go well, and that shouldn't be too big of an issue. And then hopefully you see me start prep here and see what we're looking at and what I like to do, and hopefully focus in on something like this where you're trying to start out with like a very specific kind of prep, very specific type of like over Sly Flourish they say strong start. I like to say purposeful start. It'd be like there's a thing that you can just kind of immediately get into play, which is really nice. Like, hey, it's time to sit down and play. Boom, you're going to be in combat. You've already rolled initiative. We rolled initiative at the end of the last turn, so everybody's jumping off. This is a combat in which an encounter in which there are only 2 PCs in, and so how can I make sure that the other players are doing something at the table? So I'm going to give them these NPCs, and they're going to play those, because this is all happening in the middle of the night. And then he's going to figure out how to get paid and all that good stuff. So we'll go from there, and I'll finish out the prep, trying to figure out what they're gonna do in the next coming day or so. It's gonna be Souls Day, so lots of stuff's gonna be closed down because it's the weekend. I don't know what time you have. Yeah, don't worry about it. I don't know what time you have, so perfect. But thanks for hanging out with me, guys. That's it for me this time. I'll catch you next time, and have fun. Go out there, play lots of games, and we'll see how the next session goes. We'll see. You can see how I build out the rest of the prep, and we'll get back and see how this whole cooperage thing plays out. But that's it. Thanks for hanging out. I'll talk to you guys later. All right. Bye-bye.